Hello, everyone, and welcome to Firstpost America. We're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And today we've got more on President Trump's about-face on Russia and the race for mayor of New York City heats up. These and other stories on the way, but first, a look at the latest headlines. A SpaceX capsule carrying a multinational crew from India, Poland, Hungary, and the United States splashes down off the coast of Southern California after returning from the International Space Station. Israel's military strikes targets linked to Hezbollah's Radwan force in eastern Lebanon. The latest attack comes amid a ceasefire between Israel and the Iran-backed group. The world's most valuable company, NVIDIA, says it will resume sales of its H20 artificial intelligence chips to China after Washington agrees to lift licensing curbs that halted exports. Heavy rain inundates parts of New York and New Jersey as flash floods warnings remain in effect across much of the eastern seaboard, with travel disrupted and vehicles trapped. And Equatorial Guinea slams France at the United Nations top court, accusing it of neo-colonial behavior in a long-running dispute over a multi-million-dollar Paris mansion confiscated by French authorities. President Donald Trump has taken a firmer stance on the war in Europe, and he says it's partly thanks to First Lady Melania Trump. During recent public remarks, President Trump revealed that Melania Trump played a significant role in convincing him to take a tougher approach toward Russian President Vladimir Putin amid the ongoing war in Ukraine.
I go home, I tell the First Lady, I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, "Oh, really? Another city was just hit." So it's like, look, he's, I don't want to say he's an assassin, but he's a tough guy.
Speaking from the Oval Office yesterday, President Trump even outlined a new plan to pressure the Kremlin into a ceasefire deal within 50 days. And if Putin fails to agree, President Trump has vowed to impose 100% tariffs on Russian goods and secondary sanctions on countries aiding Moscow.
One of the reasons that you're here today is to hear that we are very unhappy, I am, with Russia. But we'll discuss that maybe a different day. But we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs.
The president further pledged billions of dollars in military support for Ukraine, including Patriot missile systems, promising they would be quickly distributed to the battlefield.
Send them Patriots, which they desperately need, because Putin really surprised a lot of people. He talks nice and then he bombs everybody in the evening.
The shift in tone comes after President Trump's growing frustration with Putin's failure to follow through on promises made during their frequent phone calls. And according to the president, the First Lady's pointed observations helped open his eyes to the gap between Putin's words and actions.
It's been proven over the years. He's fooled a lot of people. He fooled Bush. He fooled a lot of people. He fooled Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden. He didn't fool me. But what I do say is that at a certain point, ultimately talk doesn't talk. It's got to be action. It's got to be results, and I hope he does it.
Now, the First Lady has largely stayed away from public political commentary, but her personal connection to Europe and her quiet influence on the president seems to have made a mark. And while Melania rarely appears alongside her husband, lately she's been more visible. The first couple attended the FIFA Club World Cup final at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey on Sunday, and days earlier they visited flood victims in central Texas. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has not officially responded, but a Russian lawmaker brushed off the threat, saying much could change in 50 days, both on the battlefield and in Washington. European leaders, too, are reacting. Denmark's foreign minister called President Trump's tariff threat unjustified, while EU officials are considering retaliatory measures if the trade war does escalate.
Today, we discussed the state of play and prospects for EU-US trade relations, including possible EU countermeasures, in light of the ongoing negotiations for an agreement in principle, as well as President Trump's announcement over the weekend of 30% general tariffs on the EU from the 1st of August, which I must say member states find absolutely unacceptable and unjustified.
And as tensions rise and deadlines looms, President Trump insists this is not his war. But with the First Lady's words echoing in the background and Ukraine's skies under siege, the 50 days may decide far more than just a trade deal. And as President Trump braces for Putin's next move, the world wonders, will words be enough this time? And now moving up the I-95 corridor from Washington to New York City, where a political billboard war has erupted in the heart of Times Square. And it's centered around two politicians vying for influence from opposite ends of America's political spectrum. A digital billboard has gone up in Midtown Manhattan, urging New Yorkers to, quote-unquote, flee socialism and move to Ohio instead. The ad reads, "Worried about Zoran? Ohio is waiting for you." A direct shot at 33-year-old Democrat Zoran Mamdani, who recently won the primary to become New York City's next mayor. The billboard was paid for by Vivek Super PAC, or VPAC, short for Victors, not Victims. It's a political action committee backing Republican Vivek Ramaswamy's 2026 bid for governor of Ohio. And according to reports, the high visibility ad costs $50,000 and is set to run for 1 week on one of Times Square's most prominent screens. The ad has cast Ramaswamy as a conservative voice for freedom while describing Mamdani as a so-called radical socialist who poses a threat to New York's future.
We put this billboard up because we couldn't think of two politicians in the country that represent such wildly different paths for the future of our nation. The Mamdani path of socialist totalitarianism versus the Vivek path of American freedom.
On X, Ramaswamy shared the billboard image, writing, quote, "Capitalism defeats socialism," end quote. The Ohio Republican Party also weighed in, sharing a poster that read, "If New Yorkers are tired of chaos and radical leadership, Ohio is waiting." But while the message on that billboard is loud, the migration trends tell a very different story. In fact, earlier this year, a report found that Philadelphia was the most popular city for New Yorkers to relocate to. And according to a 2023 report, the most common state destinations were Florida, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, Ohio did not feature in the top tier of relocation states for New York residents. And so far, Zoran Mamdani's campaign has not commented on the billboard, and the ad comes just days after Ramaswamy publicly criticized what he called the race-obsessed fringe of the right. Ironically, the former presidential candidate defended others of Indian descent, including Mamdani and Usha Vance, the wife of U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, against online attacks targeting their ethnicity.
It's a shame to watch the race-obsessed fringe of the right try to outdo the race-obsessed woke left.
Now, both Mandani and Ramaswamy are seen as rising political figures within their own respective parties. Ramaswamy, an Ohio native, has reportedly raised $17 million for his gubernatorial campaign. Meanwhile, in New York, Mamdani's victory in the mayoral primary has sparked national reactions, including from President Donald Trump. The president called him a communist, questioned his citizenship, and even suggested federal intervention if, in fact, Mamdani wins.
In New York, they're trying to elect a communist, Zoran Mamdani, the guy who wants to defund the police, take over the stores and run the stores, and have the people hand out goods. And when everything falls apart, it always does. It always works that way. It never has worked any other way. Anarchy and dictatorships prevail. This guy is a communist at the highest level, and he wants to destroy New York. I love New York, and we're not going to let him do that.
And now adding to the drama, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has now announced his return to the mayoral race, this time as an independent. And so with New York's mayoral race heating up and Ohio's governor's contest gathering steam, the billboard war in Times Square may just be a preview of a highly polarized election season ahead. America's grocery aisles may soon feel the heat, not from jalapenos, but from tomatoes. In a dramatic shakeup, the Trump administration has torched a 30-year-old trade agreement that slapped a 17% tariff on fresh tomatoes from Mexico. With nearly 70% of U.S. tomatoes coming from across the border, this decision could have a ripple effect far beyond farms, pushing up prices and thinning supplies. As Florida farmers cheer and Arizona grocers brace for impact, the question now is what happens if Mexico doesn't blink by August 1st? Our next report breaks it all down.
Tomatoes just got political, and they might be getting pricier too. President Donald Trump announced the end of a decades-old trade agreement with Mexico, imposing a fresh 17% tariff on imported tomatoes. The decision marked a dramatic escalation in trade tensions, reigniting a battle that has been simmering for nearly 3 decades. With Mexico supplying around 70% of America's tomatoes, worth nearly $3 billion a year, this move could hit both dinner plates and paychecks. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick defended the decision, framing it as a part of Trump's broader America First economic vision.
Mexico remains one of our greatest allies, but for far too long, our farmers have been crushed by unfair trade practices that undercut pricing on produce like tomatoes. That ends today.
For tomato farmers in Florida, this was the win they long waited for. The Florida Tomato Exchange praised the move as an enormous victory, calling it essential to saving an industry that has been steadily decimated by the influx of cheaper Mexican tomatoes.
This decision will protect hardworking American tomato growers from unfair Mexican trading practices and send a strong signal that the Trump administration is committed to ensuring fair markets for American agriculture.
But others are not celebrating. Arizona and Texas lawmakers slammed the tariff as reckless and harmful. Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego posted a blunt warning on social media. Arizona, buy your own tomatoes now. Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs called the move senseless, arguing that it threatens over 50,000 jobs between Arizona and Texas and will leave families paying more for basic groceries. At the heart of the issue is the now defunct Tomato Suspension Agreement, signed in 1996 after a U.S. trade court ruled that Mexican producers were selling tomatoes at artificially low prices, a practice known as dumping. The deal prevented tariffs as long as Mexican exporters met minimum pricing standards. The agreement was renewed 5 times, most recently in 2019. But in April, the Commerce Department signaled its intention to pull out in 90 days, saying the agreement had failed to protect American growers.
Even if this sanction were to be applied, Mexican tomatoes would still be exported to the United States because there is no substitute. The main problem would be that tomatoes would be more expensive in the United States.
Those 90 days are now up. And with the 17.09% tariff now live, some fear this could be just the start. Trump has already warned Mexico of an even broader 30% tariff on all goods unless a new trade agreement is reached by August 1st. Following the decision to impose levies on tomatoes, the backlash has been swift. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce called the move short-sighted, warning that Mexican tomato imports contribute $8.3 billion in economic activity and that pulling out of the agreement could spark retaliation from Mexico. Even Mexico's agriculture and economy ministries condemned the decision, insisting that their products have earned their market share through quality, not manipulation.
The gains made by Mexican fresh tomatoes in the U.S. market are due to the quality of the product and not to any unfair practices. The tariffs would only hurt American consumers' wallets, as it will be impossible to replace Mexican tomatoes.
Meanwhile, inflation remains a concern. Food prices have risen 2.9% in the past year, but tomatoes were among the few items that had actually become cheaper, down 6.8%. But that trend may now be over. In fact, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell warned last month that tariffs are likely to drive prices up, but admitted we do not yet know how much.
The economy was slowing. We actually cut rates 3 times.
Trump says it is all part of plan to protect American jobs and fix broken trade systems. But with more tariffs on the table and a deadline looming, one thing is clear. Tomatoes are just the beginning, and the rest of the menu, it's still cooking.
And now to the Middle East, where all is not well in Israel, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government is in serious trouble. One of his key coalition partners, the ultra-Orthodox Party United Torah Judaism, or UTJ, has announced it's leaving the government over a long-running dispute regarding draft exemptions for religious seminary students. 6 of the 7 remaining UTJ lawmakers have handed in their resignation letters accusing the government of failing to protect yeshiva students from military conscription. The party is made up of 2 factions, both of which have withdrawn from the coalition.
Since the authorities have made clear their intention to increase the hardship faced by Torah learners in various ways, through efforts to humiliate and trample them, I therefore believe that participation in the government and coalition must immediately end, including the resignation from all related positions.
The statement followed the Israeli army's announcement earlier this month that it would begin issuing draft notices to 54,000 ultra-Orthodox men who were previously exempt, a move prompted by the expiration of a temporary legal arrangement.
The Army will begin this week issuing summons to complete the enlistment process for ultra-Orthodox men whose status as yeshiva, religious seminary, students is no longer valid following the expiration of the previous legal arrangement. Draft notices will be sent out in waves throughout the month of July, eventually totaling 54,000 call-up orders.
Now, under a decades-old agreement, Haredi men who study full-time in yeshivas were exempted from military service. But that deal has been repeatedly challenged in Israel's Supreme Court, especially as the country remains embroiled in a war in Gaza. Last year, the court ruled that the Defense Ministry must begin conscripting seminary students, a ruling that is now being enforced. The move has outraged ultra-Orthodox parties who say religious study is a foundational principle and that their communities should not be subject to the draft in the same way as other Israelis. The UTJ says Prime Minister Netanyahu has promised to pass a new law to protect exemptions when they joined the coalition back in 2022, but failed to deliver. Now, ultra-Orthodox lawmakers have long threatened to leave the coalition over the conscription bill. In fact, last month they threatened to support an opposition motion to dissolve parliament. But now, with some members of the UTJ leaving, Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition has shrunk to a slim majority, just 61 seats in the 120-seat Knesset. Now attention turns to another major ultra-Orthodox party which has not yet left the government but has issued its own warnings. If it too withdraws, the coalition would lose its majority entirely, dropping to just 50 seats. Meanwhile, the timing couldn't be worse for Netanyahu, who's already under fire over his handling of the war in Gaza and facing growing domestic protests.
We're here to exert pressure on the Israeli government and all the other parties involved to get to a hostage deal as soon as possible, because our friends, our comrades, our brothers are in Gaza, and it's about time to end this war. That is what we think.
And on the same day the coalition fractured, the military announced that 3 more Israeli soldiers had been killed during fighting in Gaza, placing even more pressure on the government. So with a 3-month Knesset recess reportedly set to begin on July 27th, Netanyahu now has days, not months, to salvage his government. And with war, political fallout, and public anger all converging, Israel's leadership crisis may just be getting started. And finally, Kanye West is back, and so is the chaos. The rapper, now legally known as Ye, made his grand return to perform live in Shanghai over the weekend, but instead of jaw-dropping visuals and smooth sound, fans got soaked, delayed, and deeply disappointed. From torrential rain to technical meltdowns and a crowd of over 70,000 chanting for refunds, clearly this grand return did not turn out the way perhaps Ye had expected. Here's our report on how the rapper turned his Shanghai comeback into a full-blown storm, both literally and figuratively.
It was meant to be Kanye West's big comeback, a triumphant return to the stage in Shanghai, complete with lasers, fog, and artistic integrity. Instead, it turned into a soggy spectacle of technical malfunctions, refund demands, and a rapper wandering around the stage like he forgot why he came. Billed as an immersive multi-sensory journey, the only thing most fans could sense was frustration. The show kicked off with a drizzle of confusion, eventually soaking into a full-blown concert catastrophe. Ye, who showed up fashionably 40 minutes late in leather pants and a hoodie that said China, was met not with cheers but with a booming chorus of refund chants from the drenched and disgruntled. And the chaos didn't stop with the tardiness. The set list stumbled, songs restarted mid-rap, and visuals that were promised to redefine reality ended up being more like someone forgot to plug in the projector. Apparently, the rain was to blame, or maybe just karma in water form. Promoters tried to damage control on Weibo, insisting Ye's team prioritized artistic integrity. Ticket prices ranged from $135 to $375, which for many felt more like a donation to the rapper's ego than an entry fee. Social media in China exploded. One user advised him to get better, another highlighted how late he was. Meanwhile, Reddit was more unforgiving. One user called him a clown. Another said, why would someone go to his show anyway? Someone even questioned how he had so many fans. However, there were supporters too. One of them called his setlist amazing, and one requested people to stop spreading false narratives. Adding another layer to the spectacle, the concert came just days after Ye's former assistant accused him of a laundry list of crimes, including sexual assault, false imprisonment, and stalking. The court drama shadowed the already chaotic show. It remains to be seen whether Ye is trolling, unraveling, or reinventing live shows as conceptual chaos. But for now, one thing is clear: Shanghai got Ye's vision all right, rain, refunds, and regret included.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank all of you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks everyone for watching.